I need help sometimes. I just caught my first cold in like 4 years, you know, so I'm like, oh, that's what this was like. It's not, you know, it's like, oh man, okay. I remember why I don't want to do that again. Anyway, so it's, yeah, so I'm pulling things together. Let's just put it that way. So I'd like to start this morning with just 1 or 2 minutes of quiet sitting, if that's okay with you, because I had to kind of move quickly to get here. And I know maybe you guys have had some coffee, so you're probably going to be good for the next minute or 2. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, because you have to tank up and get your caffeine in, and then you can meditate. So let's take just a couple of minutes and sit quietly, and then we'll do our opening prayer and begin. You can use whatever method of meditation you prefer, quiet sitting, relaxation, whatever is in your mind. You can let it go. Okay, thanks very much. It's traditional to start with an intention. So we'll start by voicing the intention of being here and talking about the teachings for the benefit of beings. And we'll dedicate this time to all beings, freedom from suffering and the coming to ultimate goodness and Buddhahood. The formula is age-old. It's called the refuge prayer. And we take refuge in the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the path, and the Sangha as our community. And this is our higher power, if you will. And these 3 sources of refuge are things that we can rely upon in this very volatile and changing world. We can rely on the Buddha as a teacher, his teaching as a path, and the Sangha as a community. Tradition is that it's recited 3 times, so if you're not really present with one of them, you'll get present with at least one of these repetitions. We'll recite it twice in English to understand the meaning, and then I'll chant it once in Tibetan so we can have some of the blessing of reciting in the language in which it was written. So, all right. In the Buddha, it begins there. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the assembly most excellent, I take refuge until I reach enlightenment. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I achieve enlightenment for the sake of all beings. And now once in Tibetan. O Sanje Chudan Soji Chonamla Jangchu Pardu Dani Kyapsuchi Daji Jinso Jibe Sunamki Drola Penshir Sanjay Druparsho. All right, thank you. I'll recite a short prayer and then we'll begin. O Palden Sawe Lama Rinpoche Dagi Chiwar Pede Ten Shula Kadrin Jembo Gune Che Sunte Kusum Tugging a Drup Sal to Soul. Okay, thanks. So today's topic is, the topic of the Dharma talk is Dharma talk. I know that sounded a little strange. When I wrote it for the publicity this week, I said, that's going to seem like it's redundant. It's a repetitive, unnecessarily repetitive. But a part of what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk about words and how our words can be used for good and how our words can be used for, shall we say, ill. And how, as practitioners of meditation, we can choose our words differently. So this is my hope and my goal for today, is to talk about the old thing that your grandmother probably told you to do, which was first engage your brain, then engage your mouth, right? My grandma used to say this, you know. And so, but how do we do that? Because the world is, at the moment, full of a lot of provoking things. There's a lot of provocative things happening in the world, and it seems like everyone is looking to get attention. What was that old saying by the avant-garde artist who said, in the future, everyone will be world famous for 5 minutes? Yeah, Andy Warhol, right. And so I think everybody's trying to get that 5 minutes, and then because they like it, they're trying to keep it going. So, but before we get to that, I want to say one thing about being here. Because whenever I walk in this room, I just have to say a couple of words of gratitude, because we do know that Thanksgiving's coming up this week, and I am thankful for this place and for all of you. I'm thankful for what you bring here every week, and I'm thankful for the goodness that is in all of your hearts and that you bring here. Oh, yeah, thank you. Yeah, everybody's looking after me, and I love this, but yeah, thanks. Thank you so much. Oh, man, okay. I will never turn down a cup of tea. Thank you. Okay, while we're here, hydrate. All right. And so I just wanted to express a few words of gratitude for all of you and for this space and what you bring to this space. I love being in this space where so many people bring their goodness every week and meditate every week. So you're imbuing this space with your goodness, and I really appreciate you doing that, because every time guests come who've never been here before, they remark on this room. Not just, the beautiful artwork and the painting and all of that. They don't just remark about that, they say the room feels good. And I think that part of the reason this room feels good is that you bring your goodness to it. The Buddha taught that each of us has this spark of goodness that's within us, this potential for incredible well-being and goodness and compassion and wisdom. We all have this spark of goodness in us. And the more we nurture it, the greater it evidences itself, the greater it manifests for us. And so I'm just wanting to express that first and foremost, that we have this Buddha nature and we can manifest it gradually over time as we tame our mental afflictions and our obscurations and obstacles. I had, and one more thing to mention, I had part of the reason I was a little late today was because I made a bad choice. I thought I would have a Zoom meeting at home rather than here. Anyway, but the Zoom meeting was special because it was an interactive Q&A with Ken Holmes, who is the author of the Nangi Shedra program that we've been doing here monthly for the last almost 3 years. And he was from the 70s, old hippie who met the Tibetans in India, connected, and then never left. In a way, he went to live in a monastery in Scotland. He's from Great Britain. He went to live in a monastery in Scotland after meeting the great lamas in India. He came back to Scotland and then stayed there and studied and practiced and then became just a really marvelous teacher in his own right. This morning he said he's been teaching for 42 years. Wow. And so his presence and his calm and his groundedness was just so impressive and lovely to be in the presence of. So I'm bringing a little of that, hopefully, with me today. One of the things he said was, in those days, a lot of the great masters were visiting America and visiting Europe and spreading the teachings of the Dharma, and they spread it not just through the words, but through their being and how they were. And it's, of course, very challenging for us to think about how we are and think about how they are and say, it's maybe a little difficult, maybe a little different. Maybe we're not quite where they are, but we can get there gradually. And he said this. He said, we all of us have Buddha nature. He said, but we are fighting uphill. He didn't use those exact words, but he used another word that's a little colorful, and I won't use it. But he said our habits are holding us back. It's our habits and our habitual practices, our habitual tendencies, our habitual thoughts, our habitual attitudes. He said we've got a lot working against us, and we have to work through those and get to the other side of those. And so I was really touched and impressed by the simplicity with which he stated our situation. We are people who have basic sanity and goodness within us, but lots and lots of bad habits. Lots and lots of bad habits. Okay, he said they were bastards. He said those habits. Anyway, but using the colorful language about it just tells us how strong it is and how we feel, how helpless we can feel sometimes in the face of our worst impulses and habits. We can feel helpless in the presence of a strong resentment or a strong provocation. Someone calls us a name or indicates that we're less than smart. Or they will indicate that we're something they dislike or whatever. We feel judged, and then we want to react. And so this is part of the reason why I wanted to talk about our speech today. Because going back to the teachings, the basic teachings of the Buddha, I quoted this yesterday for those who were at the Compassion Mantra session. The Buddha, in his book of sayings called the Dhammapada, or the Dharma Path, Dhammapada, he opens by saying, we are what we think, All that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make the world. Pretty straightforward. What we're thinking is what we are. And what we are thinking is how we manifest to others. And so then he says that he goes on to give his very, very, very basic teaching on karma. He says, if we think, speak, and act with an impure mind, suffering follows us, just as certainly the wheel follows the ox that draws the cart. And on the other hand, if we think, speak, and act with a pure mind, happiness follows us like a shadow that we can't shake. And so this very elementary teaching on karma is incredibly helpful for us, because it means that the mechanism of suffering and happiness is right here in our hands. The mechanism that creates happiness, the mechanism that creates suffering is right here in our hands. And we who are practitioners of meditation know that our first encounter with this power we have happens when we're sitting and meditating. When we're sitting and meditating and attempting to be present with an object, whether it's an object placed on the table in front of you, a Buddha image, or your breath, whatever it might be. When we place our attention on that thing, it stays for a very short period of time, but then wanders through habit. It wanders because, we're all addicted to stimulation. Like, oh, what about this? Oh, what about that? We're all a little bit out of control, if you know what I'm saying. Oh, and as if that isn't bad enough, we develop technology to make it worse. Let the record show I'm holding up my personal cell phone, okay, which I will now put face down on the table. It's already been silenced, so I think we're okay. So we're really good at distraction, and we're really good at stimulation, and we crave all those things. So meditation is our first encounter with the power of habitual tendency. So we're watching the breath. We'll use that as our example for a meditation technique. We're watching our breath, and then suddenly a thought arises. And we then become a little fascinated by it, and we turn our attention to it, and then we're lost. Could be 30 seconds, could be a minute, could be 10 minutes, it could be, But at some point, we will recognize that we are thinking, and we are not attending to the object of meditation. And so then so our training tells us to notice, label, thinking, drop it, and then gently, 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 without judgment, bring our attention back to the breath for a fresh start. And this process of noticing, dropping, and returning with gentleness is a form of training to undo the negative habits we have of pursuing and continuing distraction against all odds. We make the choice to not continue that distraction. We make a choice to not continue that. And then we make the decision to return. And we make the decision to return with gentleness toward ourselves, which for many of us is not the easiest thing. Some of us have a little bit of negative self-judgment. I'm speaking here for myself. And we need to unlearn that and moderate that behavior for the arising of our Buddha nature to be real for us. So another thing we have difficulty with is understanding that what we say is a reflection of what's on our mind. We didn't just accidentally say this or that. It wasn't like our mouth just opened and something came out. We had to think about it first. And so this is why the Buddhist teaching is all about thinking first. I'm going to give you an example. There's a book that I recommend to folks. If reading the sutras is not easy. The Buddhist sutras, there are many, many, many of them, because don't forget the Buddha taught for 45 years, something like that. And that all the sutras are based on all the instructions he gave, and many of them were recited after his passing, recited over and over and over again, so they're filled with repetition. So they're easy to recite and easy to memorize. So what the Tibetans and the Indian scholars of the past did, this one's written by an Indian scholar in the 8th century, what they did instead was create poetry and commentary, poetry and prose that digested the meaning of the sutras and put them in a slightly easier to remember format. So in the 8th century, Shantideva, an Indian monastic, was asked to give a speech. He was asked to give a Dharma talk. And his detractors in the monastery thought he was so lazy that all he did was eat and sleep and that kind of thing. And so they wanted to embarrass him, so maybe he would leave the monastery because they just thought he was worthless. So when he said, it was his turn to give a Dharma teaching, and they actually built the teaching seat a little higher than usual. And they asked him, he asked them, would you like me to recite something from the past, or do you want me to come up with a new composition? And they said, oh yeah, new composition, please. Because they were convinced that he would fail, and they wanted him to feel so embarrassed he would leave. Now, of course, you may say, these people are Buddhists. How dare they? Well, guess what? Not every person who practices Buddhism is an enlightened being. I don't know if this is news to you. I don't know if this is news to you or not, but our hope is that we are practicing things that will make it possible for us to be Buddhists in the future. So he said, certainly. And then he began to teach, and he taught for hours. And it went on and on and on. And it was brilliant. The words he said were brilliant. And it became written down as this extensive poem called The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. And so in the chapter 5 of The Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he talks about how important it is to think before you speak. Oh, but before I get to him, I just thought I have something else to share. I want to share the Buddha's own words about this first. Because, okay, social media is part of our lives. You could say it's a great wasteland, and you might be right. Okay, let's see if we can get that. Yeah, here it is. Often, when we are on social media, people will insult us or post insulting things, hoping we will respond and they can get their 5 minutes of world famousness. So I wanted, before I go to Shantideva, who was incredibly colorful in his own way, I wanted to give the Buddha's own words about this. Because sometimes when we hear things, we want to respond. We don't want to let it stand, let that nasty word stand, let that criticism stand. And we want to criticize somebody in return. So here is what the Buddha himself said. The sutra, the introduction to this is, someone who is about to admonish or criticize another person must realize within themselves 5 qualities before doing so, so that they may be able to speak in a way that's useful. We'll put it that way. In due season, I will speak, not out of season. So that means right time, right? In due season will I speak, not out of season. In truth, I will speak, not in falsehood. Gently will I speak, not harshly. To their profit I will speak, not to their loss. With kindly intent I will speak, not in anger. That's 5. Wow, that's a lot to ask of folks like us. But this is what the Buddha said we had to do. We had to think. In due season I will speak, not out of season, meaning at the right time. In truth I will speak, not in falsehood. so we won't lie or exaggerate. Gently will I speak, not harshly. To the other person's profit, meaning benefit, will I speak, not to their loss. In other words, you won't be saying words to put somebody down or make them feel less. With kindly intent will I speak, not in anger. So the idea is we have to watch our minds before words come out. Darn it. So much easier just to react. But we're slowly learning how to take a breath before we speak. So maybe this is not 100% doable right now, especially now, because so many people speak harshly, and so many people are insulting and mean. I mean, just plain mean. But if we remember that we are what we think, all that we are arises with our thoughts, and with our thoughts we make our world, the world we live in, our little world, we will know that if we think, speak, and act with an impure meaning, selfish mind, the impure mind is the selfish mind. The word for pride and arrogance in Tibetan is ngajal, which means like I, victorious. So it's like I'm better than other people. When you are like that, pride, you feel you're better than others. So what we need to do is we have to recognize that pride is a problem, and to work to recognize it in ourselves and find a way to let it go. So for us to be able to do this is very difficult. It's just not easy to not react because everybody else is doing it. Mom, everybody's doing it. And so we have to find how to be skillful in this situation. It's going to take probably more, what's the right word? More presence of mind than we have right now. I'm probably among those. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll write a tart response and then I'll throw it away. That's probably not so good because even writing the tart response gives me the experience of ngajal. I am victorious. I can feel like I won or I hurt somebody or something. But it's just there's no point. All the mean-spiritedness does is add to what's going on. So I think it's really fascinating. Anyway, I will give you 2 more pieces of advice. The first one was from the Buddha. This one's from Shantideva. What I like about Shantideva is that he knows how it is to be human. And he has probably thought of and done just all those negative, habitual, reactive things. And so there's a chapter, the chapter 5 is called Vigilance, which means watch your mind. And so he says, when mindfulness is stationed as a sentinel, this is verse 33, just in case. When mindfulness is stationed as a sentinel, a guard upon the threshold of the mind, mental scrutiny is likewise present, returning when forgotten or dispersed. In other words, the mindfulness we get from doing shamatha meditation actually remains with us. People tell me after they've been meditating for a while, that they'll say, is it normal to notice my thoughts when I'm not meditating? And it's like, yes, it is absolutely normal. And then one person said to me once, oh my gosh, my karma must stink. And I said, what makes you say that? And they said, well, because I'm thinking bad things a lot about other people. I'm kind of trash talking them in my head. And I said, we are all there, so I feel for you, friend. Keep working with it. So then he says, if at the outset, verse number 34, if at the outset when I check my mind, I find within some fault or insufficiency, I'll stay unmoving like a log in self-possession and determination. Okay, I like this. If at the outset, when I check my mind, you got to check in with your mind. The Tibetans used to say that in the 70s like it was something hip, you know? They were learning English. It's like, check up with your mind. It's like, okay, that's cool. Anyway, so he says, check up with your mind. That's the 8th century, he's saying, check up with your mind. Maybe he's a hippie too, I don't know. If at the outset, when I check my mind, I find within some fault or insufficiency, I'll stay unmoving like a log in self-possession and determination. See, here's the thing. The person who's trying to make us mad, they want that. They want us to get mad. The person who's trying to make us mad, it satisfies them when we get mad too. The person who's trying to make us afraid, when we are afraid, that makes them happy, because they've accomplished something. So it's almost like the greatest act of resistance to not become angry and not become scared. When somebody is trying to make you scared, when someone is trying to make you frightened, when someone's trying to make you angry. So the idea is that when they make you angry, they take possession of you. They take possession of you. Lama Tsultrim Yeshe, our dear friend, the Western monastic living in Hay River, and if you're watching, hi Lama Yeshe, he posted on his social media a few weeks ago, if someone controls your emotions, they control you. Wow. Simple, direct, and true. If someone controls your emotions, they control you. And so the greatest act of freedom that we can do right now is to not allow another person to control our emotions. And instead, have self-possession and determination. Like, I am not going to give in to this. So I'll stay unmoving like a log. Okay, so then, like any good humor author, which there is some humor in here, lots of humor in Shantideva, even though he's very, very serious about so many things, there is this part where he talks about this. And so he talks about blah, 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 blah. Oh yes, this mind of mine, a wild and rampant elephant, I'll tether to that sturdy post of reflection on the teachings. And I shall narrowly stand guard that it might never slip its bonds and flee. Then he talks about that the log returns here in a few verses. Here it comes. When the urge arises, this is verse 48 in case you're following. When the urge arises in the mind to feelings of desire or wrathful hate, do not act, be silent, do not speak, and like a log of wood, be sure to stay. Like a log of wood, be sure to stay. When the mind is wild with mockery, and filled with pride and haughty arrogance, and when you want to show the hidden faults of others, to bring up old dissensions, or to act deceitfully, and when you want to fish for praise, or criticize and spoil another's name, or use harsh language, sparring for a fight, it's then that like a log you should remain. And when you yearn for wealth, attention, fame, a circle of admirers serving you, and when you look for honors, recognition, it's then that like a log you should remain. And here's one more. And when you want to do another down and cultivate advantage for yourself, and when the wish to gossip comes to you, it's then that like a log you should remain. And it goes on. So the log keeps coming back. The idea is that the log doesn't mean that you are inert. It means that you are self-possessed and determined, because he defines the log in verse 34 as self-possession and determination. So in any case, I think rather than, I do have one more to share, but I'll do that at the end of the question period. Anybody who is familiar with the 37 actions of a bodhisattva, and if you have your handy copy, it's number, hang on, I think it's number 34. So check me out, and we'll do that later. But first, we'll do maybe 10, 15 minutes of questions. If anybody has like questions or comments or whatever, we have the question microphones here so that you can be heard. Yes. Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes.
So what if you do all of the 5 things, but the recipient is not accepting those 5 things?
Mm-hmm.
So you find yourself being gentle, and of course, you know what the other person's profit's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm speaking this because I'm a wife and a mother.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. I understand.
But others do not receive. So what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
No, I understand. Well, I would say that the job of being a parent is sort of the overwhelming responsibility that a person has in their life. And especially when the children are very young, but even into their teen years, it is important to recognize that they are suffering when they act badly. And remember that as the parent, I guess the job description is to put guardrails around and to mention that when you do this, this happens. And when you do this, this happens, because I'm speaking, the parent, from experience. And these are my rules. This is my house. These are my rules. And so, yes, they won't accept it. They won't like it. They'll be very angry, especially if they have the additional suffering of being teenagers. I don't know if this is not news to you. You're a parent, but a lot of people forget that teenagers are not just little adults. Literally, their brains are on fire. Literally, their brains are on fire because their brains are rapidly developing at this stage in their life. Their brains are on fire, and they can't stop themselves. And they have a lot of other chemicals moving through their body that cause them to think and act in amazing ways. And so if we can sometimes bring back to that and then say, here's the situation. This is how it is. And maybe we'll have some other parents here who can help. Chime in, parents, we need you. But I'm still not sure I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
What's missing?
I guess I feel like, even if I try really hard to do the 5 things, it's sometimes just flat.
Oh, well, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's.
But I tried so hard.
I know. Hey, I got to tell you. Yeah, I got to tell you. We have to be our own parents sometime. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we have to be our own parent, and we have to be maybe the older sibling we never had. That wonderful older sibling that's perfect, the ones that are in the movies, that are always there for you, that are always supportive. And we have to be that for ourselves. We have to be our own parent and say, well, that happened, and I would have liked to have done that differently, but the situation called for raising my voice, or the situation called for not doing all 4 and 5 of those things. Because this is why they call it practice. And they don't call it instant perfection. They call it practice for the reason that we're going to get it wrong a lot. But what does it say in the book? It says self-possession and determination. Self-possession and determination. So we're determined to get it, to get it the way that will be most workable, and it's in process. It's a work in process. And if we're disappointed with ourselves because we weren't able to do those 5 things, it's okay because we're learning. What did somebody tell me one time? I was given this moment of clarity when somebody said, a lot of people use the word fail, but what they're really saying is the first attempt in learning. What? First, F-A-I-L. So it's going to be like that. And showing compassion for ourselves is incredibly important because, I mean, I'm joking, of course, about all these things, but the serious part is showing gentility and love to ourselves is very important too. So, Mom, I'm here with you. But is there something else that I missed? I still feel like there's one little piece that's left. Okay.
It's okay.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
I wish Mom, hey, if I could say thanks to my mom, I would thank her again because I was a mess. I was an absolute mess as a teenager, horrible as a teenager. So, so it's like, so if I can thank you instead, thanks, Kyla, thank you on behalf of all moms. My dogs are easier. Oh, dogs, yeah. Well, see, the dog is a whole different animal. The dog is a whole different situation. We have a little bit of neurosis as human beings, but we definitely have neurosis. We're dysfunctional as human beings a lot, but we're like totally non-functional as dogs. We are not good dogs. We leave the pack. We go without telling them why. And then we come back that's okay, what do we expect? Anyway, but yeah, I love dogs a lot. So I wish I could be, that kind of genuine current presence. Yes, yeah.
Good morning, Lama Kathy.
Hey,
Thank
good
you
morning.
for your
Yeah.
teachings today.
Yeah.
Boy, just a couple things. So on the last subject of being a teenager, so the Shawnee Indians, the chiefs noticed that the young men from about 17 to 26 tended to just be really irrational and without care to consequence. And they called it young man's disease. And it just
Wow.
when I heard that, I was like, well, no wonder, because really the brain isn't finished. The last part of the brain to finish formalizing is the one that understands consequence.
Oh, I was unaware of that one. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thanks for sharing that.
So I've heard people say that, well, I really wasn't worth much of anything until I was into my 30s, and I certainly can relate to that because it seemed really hard to learn from things.
Yeah.
I thought I would share that. Also, you mentioned that email. Well, that could also be auspicious because it could show you a person where they're at and giving you an opportunity to take a different path.
Well, yeah.
So it gets the poison out first. So the poison's out, so there's something else that can come out instead. And there's been times where I've needed to respond to things and I've had to write it out first and send it to my sponsor.
Right. Smart thinking.
So that I don't make the situation worse and actually generate more pain and harm in that, right? So it's, maybe that's also thinking, putting the brain first before the response comes out. So I wouldn't be hard on myself about that one. And finally, so what struck me about this is not making myself a victim to my own afflictions. And it's easier said than done, especially when in the midst of it, because we're primal and we have a parasympathetic nervous system, right? And we have traumas and things too that we're fighting against.
Oh, that's right.
So our own physiology might even be working against us, depending.
Right.
So, if I can just think that I don't want to make the situation worse through my own wrong action, maybe I can at least live through whatever's going on.
I hear you.
With keeping my own side of the street clean.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, you're talking about changing our minds and how we respond and what our intentions are. That also, people that want us to react, as opposed to respond, the difference, react versus respond.
Yeah.
Well, that infuriates them, and pretty soon, those negative, afflicted personalities don't want to be around so much anymore because we don't play ball.
I see.
And
right.
doesn't that make room for people, other things to come in instead, so we attract more positive people into our lives? Is that a thing?
That's a thing.
So with that, I just wanted to, and then I'll pass. Thanks for.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, thanks for sharing it, Charlie. I appreciate it because, you know, we all go through this. We all go through, no matter whether we're men or women, we go through this disease of youth. We do, where we have bravery without reason, and and rush forward and do things. And I think that is the one benefit of getting older, is that we do slow down somewhat physically because the brain's now formed, and we have to work with whatever has been encoded in our physiology. We have to deal with all of those things. And in that same way, be kind to and gentle with and parent ourselves. So I appreciate you bringing those things. And yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yes, yeah.
Hello. So first, back to this kind of idea of parenting.
Yeah.
I have a 2-year-old who is currently potty training.
Okay.
And
Oh boy.
one
Okay.
thing that has just been reinforced over and over the last, say, year, is that I have very little control over the outcome. And so, what I try to keep in mind, and this is more to survive rather than to try to get the right outcome, is focus on the process.
Right.
Right? Focus on the process and kind of detach from the results.
Right.
You're like, I'm gonna do.
Yeah. The process.
Yeah.
The steps.
I'm gonna do what I think I need to do to get to where I want to be, and that in and of itself has to be enough, because my kid is still gonna pee his pants.
No, boy, I really do appreciate that. And I think that this is, the focusing on the process rather than the result is very good. It's actually kind of good Dharma if you think about it, because there's in The Great Path of Awakening, Jambu Khantrul's Bodhisattva manual that he wrote in the 19th century, how to be a kind of a bodhisattva in training. He did say that being aware of your own mind and taking good care of your own mind it's a Dharma practice. And being able to rein yourself in is a Dharma practice. And being process-oriented and not result-oriented is a Dharma practice. Because he said, one of the things we have to pray for in Buddhism is we have to pray to be free of, now the words he uses are hope and fear. Hope and fear. Hope for a specific result and fear that that specific result will not happen. But a lot of people complain about the translator's use of the word hope, because hope can actually be a good thing too. So I tend to say, instead of hope and fear, I say expectation and anxiety, so that we can be a little clearer about what we're trying to go beyond. We're trying to go beyond wanting a specific result and fearing that result won't happen, and instead just be invested in the process and who we are and who the other person is in that process. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure. And I did have a question too.
Oh yes, sure.
So back to this quote about, I'm not going to get it exactly right, but whoever controls your emotions controls you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask if you could speak a little bit to kind of the delineation between when that's intentional, right? Like you've talked about how there's plenty of provocation out there, right? Like if you want to be upset or if you want to find someone who you can argue with, you're going to be able to do that pretty easily.
Right.
But the flip side of that is, we can internalize what we see as expectations or someone's perspective, and without them saying anything, we can kind of let them control our emotions and our thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to know your thoughts on kind of the difference between those two.
I'm a little bit lost, and I'm not 100% sure I see the difference. So maybe I was trying to listen carefully, but I wasn't picking up. You gave 2 examples, but I didn't quite understand them.
Well, with Thanksgiving coming up, there are going to be a lot of conversations, or at the very least, a lot of thoughts. So I guess it's kind of the difference between hearing someone lay out their expectations or their beliefs and giving you a chance to respond, and knowing that, or thinking that they believe this certain thing, and so you're going to change your behavior or your choices kind of preemptively. Is that?
Okay, now I understand. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, I do understand this, and we do often in situations where we know conflict may arise. We do a lot of self-editing, and I think that that can be good actually. When we are, it depends on where we are in our process, right? If we are not able to sit and listen, and if we get very resentful and angry, well then we have to recognize that that's where we are and be honest with ourselves. That's where we are. Therefore, we will need to edit how we present ourselves so as to bring peace to the situation. Because I mean, we know that we ourselves are not under control, and therefore putting our uncontrolled self on display may not be something that we want to do with people we care about. So I can't say that it's dishonest. I can't 100% say that it's not dishonest to do that, because it is sort of dishonest to hide your true thoughts and feelings from people. But then there's also the aspect of your intention when you speak. When we have an intention when we speak, it reads. The person gets our intention, person to person, unless they're unable to do that. If they're unable to pick up nonverbal cues and things like that, well, then they may not. But the fact of the matter is, our intention is incredibly important. And I think that this also comes to the earlier question. If our intention is coming from a good place, we have to do what we have to do. And Kempo Karthar Rinpoche himself actually said parenting is a difficult situation because you have to be harsh with your children. He did say that. Because otherwise they will not listen to you. And so, but that's not necessarily true here when you have a relative who's espousing different ideas, and you can just say, we have to agree to disagree on this, but I love you. And that's what I did with a person in my own family just recently. I said, well, we're probably never going to agree on this thing, but I want you to know I love you. I really do. I love you, and I'm here for you, no matter what. And I think that helped a little bit for me. It may not help your situation, but it helped me a little bit, and if that's useful, great. But we have to go back, what is our intention, checking up our mind before we speak, and then trying to make that come from a place of genuine caring for the other person, even if we don't agree. I hope that does.
Yeah, absolutely.
We may have to edit ourselves, though.
Sure.
It depends on where they are. And because if we know that anything we say to them will provoke them, then, it's time to talk about something else.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, gosh, this will be the last question. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lama Kathy.
No, thank you.
Just as a parent, my heart goes out to other parents who are struggling, and I just want to share my experience a little.
Please.
And that I find that the log suggestion helps quite a bit. But for me, watching my mind is I expect myself as a mother. In our society, being a mother, being a father these days has a lot of challenges too. And now that they're increasing expectations of men, and especially with many men not having even a template from previous generations.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm.
But being a mother, mothers are often expected, and we often expect ourselves to be perfect and excellent all the time, and not just like good enough, and not to sometimes fail. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, that's a struggle, and I can be harsh on myself when things don't work out and it doesn't produce that way. And even other mothers can be like, well, you should try it this way. And sometimes, my kid has certain issues that their kid doesn't have, or vice versa. So I'm learning to be compassionate for myself as a mother. And it's an ongoing thing. And for me,
It's a process.
Yeah, the question
process.
the question was about with the going, making my mind like a log, sort of like that. With my kid, I'm fine with doing that, like even acting as if, even though I'm
Right.
furious,
Right.
to just be like, I'm going to be inert. But with an adult, with whom I'm in relation, I mean, as a friend, as a
Right.
co-parent,
Yeah.
or as a partner,
Yeah.
that, like someone I'm close to, that does feel a little like, it feels like suppressing my
I
anger,
understand.
which
Yeah.
I do, and then I'll blow up. So how
Right.
do we
Yeah.
address that?
And I do think that these last few questions are all related, so I'm kind of glad they all came in a group like this. Because I do think we're taking teachings that are given from the highest point of view, the point of view of an enlightened being speaking to us and telling us this is how you have to train. And of course, we're not going to meet that expectation. We're not going to meet that, but at least we know what we're looking for, and we know what we're aiming for. And that's why I think books like The 37 Actions of a Bodhisattva are great, because they state the exact perfect behavior. And even if all we can do is take 1 or 2 steps toward that behavior, that's all to the good. Because anytime we abstain from acting out our worst impulses, that's good. Karmically and in every other way. It's good when we can abstain, even if it's just for a minute or two, from our worst impulses. That's really good, because what was the definition of the log? Self-possession and determination. And I think the self-possession is like, I know my impact in the world, I know who I am in this relationship, I know all of these things, and I am determined to make this work. You know, so yeah, you don't want to, but then you also have to understand who you are in that moment. Not just in the big scheme of things, but who you are in that moment. If I am afraid that I am going to say something and really create a rift with someone, I will actually choose to say, I need to talk about this later, because I'm not feeling up to this conversation right now. I want to have it, and I will have it, but I can't have it now. And I don't know that this speaks to your question, but it's something that comes to my mind as I think about the complexity of these teachings, and the fact that we're not there yet. You know, we're not in that place yet, and we're works in progress. Talk about process and progress. You can't be dishonest about your feelings. So I think that's not what he's asking. He's saying, recognize where you are and act accordingly, and meaning where your mind is. If you're really, really angry, be very, very careful. I think that's what he's saying.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that, and I think we talked about this when the previous questioner was at the microphone, it's like we have to try to make whatever we say to someone come from a place that is genuine within us and being genuine with them. And then even if we make a mistake and say things that aren't right, we did our best to maintain a positive relationship. But I'm still not sure that's addressing what your question was. Am I close?
Yeah, it is, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, okay, thanks. I was a journalist first before I got this gig, and I was a journalist for 15 years, and of course interviewing people and then attempting to express what their thoughts and feelings are in writing was always a challenge for me. But codependency helped a little. Couple good years in Al-Anon. Anyway, so in any case, I really appreciate your thoughts and questions and everything that everybody's brought today. And thank you for bringing your mom wisdom. You know, we need mom wisdom. We do need it, you know, so I appreciate this. So now our time together is coming to an end, but here's the part where we make the aspiration that we take whatever we can from this place that we have been, and this wisdom we shared together, and this space that we held for each other, and we take that with us into our daily life. And again, intention is everything. And so what we do at the conclusion is we dedicate the goodness that we've accomplished. And I just realized I didn't read verse 34 to you. Sorry. Let's make it a piece. Because harsh words disturb, this is verse 34 of the 37 actions of a bodhisattva. Because harsh words disturb the minds of others and cause the bodhisattva's training to deteriorate, abandoning harsh speech that disturbs others is the bodhisattva's practice. Now, of course, Mom, sometimes we've got to say stuff. And sometimes, person in relationship, we got to say stuff. But to say it from a good place rather than wanting the words to wound them. We don't want the words to wound them. We want to speak the truth without that harshness. So, anyway, okay. So, we have on our prayer sheet some prayers of dedication and aspiration. I will recite this because we're short on time. We'll recite it only in English today and bring together all the goodness and dedicate all the goodness to all beings. We'll start with the words by this merit. By this merit, may all attain omniscience. May it defeat the enemy, wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may I free all beings. The courageous Manjushri, who knows everything as it is, Samantabhadra, who also knows in the same way, and all the bodhisattvas, that I may follow in their path, I completely dedicate all this virtue. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you being here, and we'll see you next time. Oh gosh, let's see, next time have a good Thanksgiving. I hope everything goes well at the table. Bring your best Buddha self to the table. Okay, thanks, Fred. Okay, thank you.